Welcome back, everyone, to Context for Chaos, and we are on to another 2023 interview with Corinna Rosella. This was an amazing conversation about political ideology and looking deeper into tarot from a more humanitarian focus. Corinna also works with herbalism and owned a shop in 2023, which we'll talk about, where they created a beautiful community around spell work and witchcraft and herbalism of the desert. Now, without further ado, here is my interview with Corinna from 2023. Hello, Corinna. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with me.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have to ask you the question I ask every person that comes on, because it's one of the questions that I love the most. How did you come to tarot? Did you have a family that was already involved in tarot? Was it a community thing? Did you find it yourself? What was your journey to tarot cards in general?
Yeah, so I very much come from a family of skeptics, and I'm a very Capricorn heavy person. So my journey to tarot was not, I don't know if anyone's journey to tarot is easy, so I don't necessarily want to say it wasn't easy, but I think that there was a lot of steps and a lot of uncoverings that I had to do. And I did, well, there's two answers to that question, really. Something I've actually never talked about anywhere, I think, and not on a podcast before, is I actually, as a child, always had this idea that I was going to be a witch when I was older, that I was a witch and I was going to be a professional witch. And I haven't really talked about that. But I had a memory. I don't remember a ton about my childhood. But I had a memory a couple of years ago that when I was about 7 or 8, my mom took me to a psychic fair. And I was looking at all the tarot decks. And a few years ago, when I was, began doing tarot as a full-time job, along with herbalism, I asked my mom about that. And I said, why did you take me there? And she said, well, because you were a psychic, which is really funny because like my mom is very skeptical. But how I came to tarot in my adult life, I was around 27, 28. It wasn't quite my Saturn return. I'm 41 now, for context. And I actually was like really struggling with an eating disorder, really seriously. And I didn't feel like I had a way out. I felt like, eating disorders the experience, I think, is very, very similar to having an addiction. You don't feel like there's a way out when you're in the thick of it. And, I also was drinking a lot at the time. And I had this moment where I was like, there has to be a way for me to like overcome what I'm doing. And I went into an herb shop and bought the Smith Rider-Waite deck. And I just started carrying it around. I still have that deck. And I was traveling a little bit and I just started I was giving myself readings every day. It was really difficult. I think tarot is a wonderful tool for assessing your own ego and how your own ego can show up and actually sabotage you. So I was, dealing with a lot of that. And I just started giving other people readings. I would meet people and say, I'm learning this thing. I want, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I want to practice. And people would just be like, how did you know that? How did you know that? How are you this good at this? And you just started. And that's when I really felt like the call to do it professionally. And I kind of like started down that path for a couple of years. Life got in the way. And then I was just doing it for fun. And then in 2018, 2017, I created Rise Up Good Witch and moved my life towards doing it professionally.
That's awesome. I have a semi-similar story. My family's skeptics. Nobody's psychic. No one, claims to have intuition. It's all, left brain, or if it's right brain, it's music. It's not, anything to do with this kind of stuff. But I understand that. I think I've met a lot of people who dealt with a blockage for a long time, even if it wasn't a blockage they didn't realize they had. It was like, I didn't know that this was going to be such an integral part of my life. I didn't know that this was something I was like, quote unquote, missing. And it's so funny you just said that you that you knew you were going to grow up to be a witch, because I swear to you, a week, maybe a week ago, maybe 3 days ago, I don't know. I said to myself, I was like, am I doing the thing I thought I was going to do so long ago? And I just did. It didn't even occur to me that that's the full circle of the situation. So that is so, it's really nice to hear from, in my own life, that other people have had that experience of like, it just kind of finds you again, or you kind of get called. It's not really, like, you can't escape it. And when you do, that is when, addictions, I think a lot of times get really a hold of you, because you don't have a spiritual outlet in any way.
Yeah. And just like
So,
we live in a
yeah.
really difficult world, it's like really hard to
Yeah.
cope with the world we live in. So we kind of create all kinds of barriers to survive. And then, yeah. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm really excited to talk to you also, because it's about liberating in a more, let's say, theoretical way or cerebral way, which is like the swords, it's like, what's the truth? And when you know the truth, you can really get set free, because you're not so confined or hooked or trapped by something that you don't even know is happening, because it's something to do with like a stereotype or a social construct or something like that. But that is a lot of the things that I think both of us with skeptical households, or at least just not non-accessible, how there's nothing around, like there's nothing there to really relate to you to, or to feel good with in that way. And so it's like you have to kind of find your own truth, even if it's maybe not against people, but it's not, anything anyone can say, oh, I understand what you're feeling, and I understand where you're going, and actually go to the left, go that way. If you go to the right, it'll take way longer. It's like nobody's there to say anything.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you've been able to translate this deck in a very unique way. Was it your community work, your social work, your, just reaching out to marginalized or forgotten, or, just on the periphery communities in all sorts of ways? Was that what helped you translate the cards into this more, I'd say just like a higher philosophy, like just sort of like a really, not euphoric, but like like an actual connecting kind of way. Like it feels like, in a community, and like looking at each other as like equals, and like being there with each other on a more cerebral level, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I feel like I sort of use the metaphor of like a soup for a lot. I love eating soup. It's like my favorite food. But also I just feel like sometimes things need to brew for a while. Like all the flavors need to come together. And I've been doing like, on some level, activism, community organizing since I was 18 years old. That was a place that I put a lot of my energy, because I've dealt with a lot of mental health stuff, a lot of trauma. And I think that I channeled a lot of that anger into social justice work. And like my early years, I was like an annoying white kid, like doing social justice work with no like personal understanding of how I was showing up. So I try to own that a lot. Um, but I think like to me for a really long time, and I don't talk about this very much either, but I actually like went through a period in my 20s where I was super into yoga, and I got my teacher training, and that was really just to fuel my eating disorder. So it's not really something I do, but I think during that time I was sort of like, okay, I come from this background of like leftist politics, like punk rock, and yet like I'm doing yoga, and like learning how to like focus my brain is so important to me, but like that's like not aligned with the other things that I do. So I think in that time of my life I felt really disconnected from, like I was like, and then also that feeling of like, who am I to heal? Like my life hasn't been that bad. Like why do I need healing? Just buck up and do a better job, Corinna. And I think like tarot ultimately is like a big call out. And that's the way it should be used. A lot of people don't want to use it that way. So I think like for me, I've been studying leftist politics since I was a teenager. Those are the frameworks that I see the world in. And when I say leftist politics, to be, more specific, I'm talking about acknowledging that the personal is political, that capitalism harms us on individual levels, that systems of power over affect our relationships to one another, they affect our access to healing. And I think like when people work with tarot without acknowledging the way that systems of oppression and larger structures can harm us and like have really detrimental and often deadly effects on our lives, there's a missing piece there. So when I look at tarot, I really, it's been informed by my own life, honestly. Like a lot of what I teach is just based on my own life lessons or the things that I've seen happen in my communities, or the things that I've seen, the harms that have been caused in community. Um, and getting older, I mean, now that I'm in midlife, it's an interesting time when you arrive at that place, I think, because suddenly you're like, okay, I have a scope now. I have a scope of time. Like I was an adult more than 20 years ago still. And I have this, so I can see sort of like when you're 21 and you're really like learning about stuff and like super passionate, very night energy. I always call it like night energy when people are like that. But
Very Knight energy.
it's,
Very Knight of
yeah,
Swords too. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Knight of Swords is the person that reposts the meme without fact checking it, is like what I say about
That
Knight
is so real. That, yes, please continue, but that is very real.
Yeah, that's what I talked about a lot in Tarot School for Liberation was like Knight of Swords, like someone who's well intentioned, but they're spreading misinformation, you know? Knight of Wands, someone who's taking actions without thinking about it. And I think like when you're young, you see things in this vacuum because you've only had and you know, like lots of 22-year-olds have been through lots. I had been through lots of that time, but it was still like you have this scope that's narrow because of not being alive as many years as an elder. And then I think when you get older, you're like, I can see the trajectory more easily because I can see the way things have changed over time. So I don't really know if that answers like your original question.
Oh yeah, that does. That's actually exactly what I wanted to hear was, that this has been a part of your life forever, that this is just something you naturally gravitate towards. This is something that you think is a huge part of our mindset, our social construct without us really either knowing, or even if we do know a little bit, we don't know what honestly I think you, especially looking through the tarot, being so systematic and like having very breakdowns of ideas of what different things could be, especially like we got swords, we have pentacles, we have what swords would be, like you said, misinformation or the truth in like a harsh way. Pentacles is money, capitalism, or are you putting your talents to use in a way that feels good to you, or there's so many different things that we can say government, it's like it's all like a fabric at the it's all connected on a community level, on a personal level, on a governmental level, that it's important that this is a perspective that we look at. And you're right, because when we're young, I agree with you. I will say I do forgive younger me, you, everybody, because it is that's where we kind of learn our fight. That is where the optimism and the expectations of what life should be and what it should be for everybody. And, everything, every new movement is young. Every new idea is young. Everything is kind of figuring out its sea legs. And then it gains its own experience and then becomes that elder figure. Some of us learn through mistakes, like the Knight of Wands. Some of us learn through, hurting people's emotions or going into things too haphazardly, like the Knight of Cups. So I agree, but I think that's when I have those moments of like, I should have been more informed of XYZ. I'm like, if I was more informed, I think I'd been too tired and just would have given up already at 25. I would have not even gotten here, right? I mean,
Yeah, that makes sense.
so Tarot for Liberation, you brought it up. So, and you have another course out right now called Three of Pentacles right now, right? That's your 10-month long course with like a panel of tarot readers. Are you one of the panel? Are you on the panel as well, or is it
Yeah,
all?
I'm so every month I have a different collaborator that comes on and we sort of like and the reason I wanted to do that is because I don't want to be like I'm an expert, I know everything. I want to bring in people that have differing opinions than me, that have different perspectives, different skill sets. Um But the Three of Pentacles was really developed based on teaching Tarot School for Liberation for about 2 years. It was a very intensive 2 years of teaching Tarot School for Liberation, or I guess it was 3 years because I started it April 2020, which was that's one of the reasons I think that it took off. I was like, I never was, people were always like, why don't you teach tarot? I was like, well, I just don't feel like tarot can be taught. And every time I teach something, um, and I know that from listening to your podcast, I know that you identify as psychic. So I think this is sort of like a psychic thing. Every time I have a class or an offering, it's that soup. It's been brewing. And then I wake up one day and I'm like, I got the outline. I got everything. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And I had a moment, I think late April, early May, where I suddenly was like, oh my God, teaching tarot as a tool for liberation in the context of late capitalism, unlearning systems of oppression within us while also like doing trauma informed work. And it just was a concept that I was suddenly like, I can do this. And then like the George Floyd stuff happened and we had an uprising for Black lives, and the pandemic was making everyone talk about accessibility issues. And I think it was just like the moment that it came to fruition was the moment where it was like the medicine that people needed. People wanted to talk about privilege and they didn't really know how. They wanted to talk about trauma healing in the context of late capitalism. So I think like it really came together. But I'm by like my education, I have a master's degree in applied anthropology. Anthropology is not a job where you can like go on Craigslist and like search for like a job in anthropology. It's something that you apply to everything you do. So I think for me, one of those things, having a background in research, was anytime that I offer something, I get the feedback of the people that took it, and then I create something different based on their feedback. So for me, I really created Three of Pentacles because I got feedback on Tarot School for Liberation about what was missing and what they wanted to know more about. So my idea with Tarot School, and I really believe this in my teaching style, we can't just be like, here's the Page of Cups. This means X, Y, and Z. Oh, and then you got the Hierophant, which means this. There has to be a way to apply the concepts in the cards to each other, and like using your own intuition, using like channeling, psychic ability, ancestral connection. It can't just be like, this card is in a vacuum and this means this and this means this. So I want to help people learn to do that. I want to help people learn how to like apply different concepts. That is so much about what anthropology is about. So it was easy for me to look at it that way. And really a lot of what I do as a tarot teacher is I encourage people to get to the root of what it is, whether that be like a trauma. It's usually a trauma that has created like a self-limiting belief that makes them doubt themselves, that makes them doubt their perspective. Because I really only started identifying as psychic even like in the a couple of years into doing Rise Up Good Witch. And it wasn't because I wasn't, it was because I'm a skeptical person. And I was like, well, I don't know when I'm gonna die. I don't know when anyone's gonna die, so I guess I'm not psychic. And
That's actually a question that we ask ourselves. If we don't really know we're psychic, well, like, well, if I can't tell when someone's going to die, then I obviously am not psychic. Like,
yeah. Which now I'm like, I think about this, and I was talking to my tarot students about this I think I talk about this all the time. For me personally, I don't really believe in fate. I think there's a little tiny bit of fate out there for us, but I think most of it is up to us. So like I couldn't tell someone when they're going to die or when they're going to meet their next boyfriend or whatever, because like that's up to them. And like if I go in there as a reader and I'm like, oh, you're going to meet them in September and you're going to die in 2031, that is me trying to play God, or like me thinking that I have the power. And really what I tell people regularly in readings is I say, I've probably said this 100 times, and now I own a shop and I do readings that people walk off the street. I tell them, you could walk outside today and get hit by a semi and die. There is nothing, which maybe is not the best bedside manner, but I'm just like, I can't tell you what's going to happen because it hasn't happened yet. But what I can see when I'm doing readings is I can see where the cycle is. And the cycle, understanding your own pattern, understanding what's hidden in your subconscious, understanding your own barriers is the best way to predict what's going to happen. Like if someone has a history of blowing, like I'm totally going on a different topic. Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Um, like if someone has a history of blowing up all their relationships, getting angry, and they can't be around the same person for more than 6 months. I can't predict that's going to happen again, but if you haven't dealt with that, it's probably going to happen again. Or like addiction, those patterns. And I learned that from looking at my own, drug and alcohol abuse, my own eating disorder. Is just like the only way you can predict the future is by looking at the past and seeing what's not healed from the past.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, as above, so below, blessed be.